Welcome to the City Club of Eugene's February 24th, 2023 program with Congresswoman Val Hoyle, an update on local, regional, and national issues. This is the 19th program of our 2022-2023 programming year. My name is Karen Knutson and I am City Club's president. The City Club of Eugene comes to you live today from the 5th Street Market District in downtown Eugene. We are delighted to welcome Representative Hoyle, other elected officials, all City Club members, and everyone who is listening today to this program. It's truly a pleasure to have you with us as a part of this community conversation. For almost 30 years, the City Club of Eugene has been delivering our mission to build community vision through open inquiry by coordinating weekly programs on topical, engaging community issues. The City Club of Eugene creates the space for civil discussions about civic issues every week. And in doing so, we are among the most active and influential civic organizations in the state, and we address a remarkable range of issues and topics in every City Club program year. You are key to this work. Support for the City Club of Eugene is provided by our members and both business and in-kind sponsors. Our diamond sponsors are Kaiser Permanente, the University of Oregon, Peace Health, and Lane Community College, and we appreciate the support of the City of Eugene and Lane County. You too can support City Club's mission and all of our weekly programming by becoming a member at our website, cityclubofeugene.org. I'll say right now, or maybe every week, every say Monday, Wednesday, Friday, there is a new report about the ramifications of disconnection from one another. Studies about loneliness, the breadth and depth of our mental health challenges, or the difficulty of shaking off a habit of isolation as we emerge from a multi-year pandemic. Then, on the intervening Tuesday, Thursdays, you might find news of our fracturing communities and media landscape, the fundamental challenge this presents to democratic governance and to our ability to address crises that we have no choice but to face. Interestingly, all of these reports and articles seem to conclude with an allusion to the critical importance of meeting, talking with each other, engaging with each other, learning from one another in community. And that is the work that City Club does every week. So we invite you to join us every week as we hear directly from local, national, and international experts, today certainly being a great example of that. And we encourage you to ask questions of our speakers and to discuss the program with one another. Today is no different. We'll have a City Club Q&A after hearing from Representative Hoyle. And with that, it is my pleasure to introduce our speaker today. In January, Congresswoman Val Hoyle took her first oath of office representing Oregon's 4th Congressional District in the U.S. Congress. Though she joins the 118th Congress as a freshman lawmaker, she is no stranger to politics. In 2018, Representative Hoyle began serving as Oregon's elected labor commissioner and focused on issues impacting worker and family quality of life. As a new member of the U.S. Congress, Representative Hoyle is now responsible for representing the full range of issues impacting more than 700,000 constituents in the 4th Congressional District. As many in this room well know, Representative Hoyle was elected to the Oregon House of Representatives in 2010, representing West Eugene and Junction City, and served as Majority Leader of Oregon's House. She was later elected to serve as Labor Commissioner, statewide elected nonpartisan role, leading Oregon's Bureau of Labor and Industries. She attended Bunker Hill Community College and graduated from Manual College with a degree in political science and a concentration in international studies. And she spent 25 years working in the bicycle industry and retail management, manufacturing, distribution, and international trade. She first served as a member and then chair of the Expert Council of Oregon. I first met Representative Hoyle as she was handing me a plate of paella at a local fundraiser addressing housing and homelessness. I couldn't have been more grateful for that delicious meal and that work in community. It's a pleasure to welcome you to City Club, Representative Hoyle.
Wow, is all I have to say. I know most of you in this room, we've fought together to make things better in this area for many, many years in many different ways, and so many of you supported me to get here, and I am very, very, very grateful. It has been a whirlwind, I think 6 weeks, maybe 7 weeks, I'm not sure. And someone said, well, what's most surprising and what have you found the most difficult? My goal is to figure out how to not get lost from my office to either my committee room or the Capitol where I have to vote just once. I have not had that one day. It gets really complicated, and there are all these tunnels underneath. So that's my goal. I think being there, you know, what surprised me the most is my fear when I went to Congress was that it was totally broken and there was no way to work together with anyone or get anything done. I think the American people spoke very clearly. We have a narrow majority, and normally when you have one party that has the presidency, the Senate, and the House in that election, things shift wildly in the other direction. That didn't happen. That didn't happen because the American people said, we are done with the crazy. So what Democrats do when they have a narrow majority is figure out how to work together and moderate their policies. That is not what's happening in the House. Kevin McCarthy, we spent an excruciating 4.5 days trying to pick a speaker. I think, who is it? Kurt Schrader told Andrea Salinas that she has voted more times for speaker than he did in his entire time in Congress. So not quite as much as Peter DeFazio, but close. And there was an opportunity. There was an opportunity, like what happened in Ohio, like what happened, you know, in Alaska, to reach across and pick someone who could work with both sides. But that's not what Kevin McCarthy chose to do. He chose to pander and give away the power of the speakership to the most extreme elements in his party. People more extreme than Marjorie Taylor Greene. That's saying something. And Matt Gaetz said he finally voted, let the vote go through on the 15th vote because he ran out of things to ask for. He ran out of things to ask for. So there was an opportunity, and I believe that's what the American people asked for. Now, this district, the 4th Congressional District, has always been a swing district. There is Curry, Coos, and Douglas County, and then we have Lane, Benton, and Lincoln County. We have rural Lane, rural Benton, and this district has changed in redistricting to add Lincoln County, so it is 250 miles of the coast, from the California border up to the top of Lincoln County. And that's for a reason. This is a coastal district, and coastal issues are incredibly important. I met with some fishermen 2 days ago, members of the fishing community in Lincoln County, and their concerns and what they're seeing in the upwelling. So what happens with water is it, you know, in the ocean, it goes out, travels around the world, comes back, and so the upwelling that we're seeing now is water from 60 to 80 years ago, right? As water travels, it comes back, comes up, and then goes back over. And they are seeing significantly more acidic water. This is affecting our fish. They are very clear that climate is affecting the fish and the ocean health. And that's something that I can focus on very, very clearly. And so I've joined the Oceans Caucus. I've joined a number of different caucuses, but that is one. And I think whether it's the ocean or forest, 85% of the 4th Congressional District is forest land. 72% is timberland. So this district is on the forefront, whether it's wildfires, whether it's drought, whether it's ocean health, whether it's extreme storms. We are right here at the forefront of the effects of climate change. So that is something that I ended up getting some really great assignments. Transportation and infrastructure, following, yeah. And I'm ranking, when you have the chair and the ranking member, which is, you know, the Democratic leadership, and they made me ranking vice chair of the Highway and Surface Transportation Subcommittee, which is really, really important. And I worked very hard to get that. There were only 5 spots, and there were 25 freshmen that wanted it. So you all know how I fight for things. So I called everyone to get that, because Transportation infrastructure investments are so critical everywhere, but specifically in this district, whether it's the Port of Coos Bay, which I'll talk a little bit more about that later, or improving our roads, improving our bridges, making sure that the infrastructure for, like in Lincoln County, the earthen dam that holds back and protects their water for Newport, I mean, that is in danger of failing. I mean, with a 2-point earthquake, it could fail and wipe out 20% of Newport and 101. We don't want that. So these are, what we have done is made infrastructure investment a partisan issue. It should not be a partisan issue. And we need to start fixing the infrastructure that we have. And also build new infrastructure that we need so that we can move forward. We all benefit from the infrastructure that was built during the Works Project administration. So whether that was Civic Stadium or libraries or roads or bridges, right, we still benefit from that. So that's, and I did talk to the chair of that committee, and he said, this is one of the committees that still works in a bipartisan way. We have our different ideas, but we're here to get things done. And he is very much in support of the investment for the Coos Bay Port, which, you know, if we're able to do this, and there's channel deepening, and then it will be a green energy port, the first in the world, that will go straight to rail, so we're taking diesel trucks off the road. It allows our farmers and fishermen and manufacturers to send our goods to market. It's 2 days closer to the Far East. And it will provide, both directly and with the ancillary jobs, 9,000 jobs between Coos, Douglas, and Lane County. That's not a small thing, because we'll tell you, and Kitty, you remember this, in the South Coast, that used to have our highest density of union membership. When people would work in the mills, work in manufacturing, work in the timber industry, they could live there, graduate from high school, get a really good middle-class job, and now that's gone. And they blame Democrats, whether it's true or not. You know, they're angry. They know, used to be that we would export our goods everywhere else. And now I was talking to the community college president down there, and she said, now our biggest export is our children, because they can't stay here, there's no future. So this would be a game changer. It also reduces supply chain congestion on the West Coast by 10 to 12%. That's not a small thing. So we can be that solution. Right now, 70% of the containers going through Prince Rupert Sound in Canada come to the U.S. because of a lack of capacity. So Canada has put over $1 billion investment because they recognize what we need. We should be doing that as well. The channel deepening would allow for us to have offshore wind. So we're talking with BOEM, which is the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, about that. And quite frankly, asking them to go back to the table, because what they did is what federal government agencies do too often, which is to come into a community, say, well, it says here we need to have a listening session with the fishing community, with people that care about whale migration, with the local community. And they go and they have listening sessions. For those on the radio, I'm using air quotes. But it's just to check a box. So they had listening sessions with some really important concerns, because the call areas that they have where they want to put offshore wind are really important fishing areas, right? We have one of the richest ocean ecosystems, right, on the continental shelf in the world. And again, if you have floating wind turbines and they're chained together, does that affect whale migration? Does it affect, you know, their ability to fish for whiting or any of these other things? So I'm meeting with the head of BOEM next week to say, you've come in and not paid attention to some very real concerns for the community. So this is where we want to go, and you need to listen, because we are not going to give up the health of our ocean and our fish and our whale migration to do something else. And it doesn't have to be an either or, but they do need to listen and go back to the drawing board and start over and do this in an inclusive process so that we can have both things. So that's what I'm focused on, is how do we make the federal government work for the people who rely on those services. So I'm also on the Water Subcommittee, on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, which is really important because we have rivers and streams and ocean. So it's all of the investments and the, Water Resources Act, and, again, it's focused on the infrastructure that we have with water. I'm also on the Natural Resources Committee, which was my second appointment, which was fantastic. And on the, you get a clap, that's a good thing. On the, it's the Water, Wildlife, and Forestry Subcommittee. We call it WWF. Now, on the Transportation Infrastructure Committee, our first set of hearings was on the supply chain crisis, and we all had different ideas about what we needed to do. I was like, Coos Bay Port, we can be, Oregon District 4 can be your solution, and other people, had different ideas. But it was a good, robust, authentic conversation. Some bomb throwing, but not mostly. My first committee hearing in Natural Resources, we debated whether or not members should be able to bring guns to the committee hearing. So I sit right across, there's a horseshoe, I sit right across from Lauren Boebert. Paul Gosar is on the committee, and 7 other members of what I call the Sedition Caucus. So I called the chair and I said, look, I care about these issues, right? I care about these issues deeply, and my district does. Is it worth my time to come? Because there's a lot of bomb throwers. Now, I will work in a bipartisan way wherever I can, where it doesn't, while still upholding my values and the things that I said I would do and for the people that elected me. But there's a way to work together, and I just said, is this worth my time? And he said, yes, I want to work with you. And I'm not a bomb thrower either. And I'm like, okay, because that first committee hearing was really something. But that's what you need to do. And during the 4.5 days, where Lisa Fragola and Don Leslie came out, and it was really wonderful to have friends there. I spent my time on the floor visiting with other people from different parties, from different parts of the country, and you don't normally get that opportunity because you're on a committee and you meet with people from your committee, and Democrats sit on one side and Republicans sit on the other, and there isn't a lot of opportunity to meet your 434 colleagues. So there's some people, I did not bother talking to George Santos, no point. But I did visit with a number of people and found out their issues, and working with a Republican from Wisconsin on rural mental health and public safety issues, right? Those are issues in rural Wisconsin, just like they are in rural Oregon. So I am hopeful that we can work together. I mean, disappointed isn't a strong enough word. I can't think of a strong enough word that would be appropriate, to say in public on the radio, but that we couldn't figure out a way to work together when there are so many people that want to do that. But what Republicans have said is, I would love to work with you, I would love to do that, but if I do, I'm going to lose my primary. Whereas Democrats, we're more comfortable with a big tent. Not that we don't have primaries, because that's an important part of our political process, but there, it's very, very different. There is a part of their supporters that do not see compromise as weakness, right? Even when you're standing firm in matters of substance, you're compromising on matters of style and where you can work together, that is not something they're interested in. But I'm finding enough people, and again, I will work very hard to make sure that Democrats have the majority in 2024, because Republicans are exceptional at messaging. So we've voted on a lot of bills that didn't address the supply chain crisis or the economy or all of the things that they said they wanted to address, affordable health care, these things. We have voted on bills that are purely campaign messaging bills that do nothing. So they're better at messaging, I'll admit that. We're better at governing. So, right? We are. So, with that, I'm visiting every part of this district, and again, this district is not just Eugene and Corvallis, right? It is a broad district, but there are very similar issues. Housing is number one wherever I go. People talk about housing. On the coast, there are no vacancies. So every employer I talk to says my biggest problem in getting workers is finding housing. Now, if we bring 9,000 jobs, we need to house them. And that means we have to think about housing differently. We have to figure out where to put this housing, how to do it without impacting the lands and the protections that we have that makes Oregon such a beautiful place. But it means getting out of our comfort zone, because what we're doing isn't enough. So if it's not sprawl, then maybe it's up, or we just have to be creative. And so, yes, we need housing options for people and supportive systems for those who are houseless, but we also need middle-income housing. We don't have that, right? I went to John Day as labor commissioner, and they said they couldn't find a doctor. They were having trouble recruiting a doctor because they didn't have high-income housing. They just didn't have it. So this is not, you know, it is here where we have 1.5% vacancy rate, and again, less on the coast. It's critical, but I think this is the time when we can really be creative. And then working a lot on workforce. So I'm on work groups, on workforce, on how do we change the approach to education for the 50% of jobs that need more than a high school degree, less than a college degree, because we have people that are going to college, and college degrees are important, right? Like, you don't want your brain surgeon to say, well, I just went through an apprenticeship program online. That would be inappropriate. But for the 50% of jobs that need a little more than that and less, we need to destigmatize certifications and journey cards. Just try and find an electrician or a plumber, and you know that those jobs are good, right? That is not a second-rate option because they're making good money. It takes 7 or 8 years to get that journey card, and they have no college debt. So, you know, the current system isn't working for students who are saddled with an enormous college debt. I mean, for my student loans, I've paid twice as much as I borrowed, and I still owe what I borrowed, right? That's wrong. That is absolutely wrong. And that's because we didn't have the money to pay it up front. So we need to figure out how to deliver education different for students. We are not meeting the workforce needs. So we need to figure out how to help kids get into those jobs that pay well that we need filled. We just went to Thurston High, and they've got some great programs in coding, in cooking, right, in the trades. But we have to expand how we think about it. And it's not working for institutions of higher education who are having to do more with less, right, and being attacked from all sides. So I think that when you're in crisis, that's the time when people are willing to make changes. And so I personally think the apprenticeship model, where you teach to an industry standard, that whatever the industry standard is, let's say it's logistics and distribution, you have certified classroom instructions. We need new ways to deliver that. And then paid supervised on-the-job training, because for so many people in this district, which has an average income of $32,000 a year, and that's artificially high because of Eugene and Corvallis, that's artificially high, they can't afford to work for free. That's an unrealistic expectation, and I think that work is of value, and if you're working, you should get paid. So we're doing apprenticeship programs on the South Coast in surgical technician, medical assistants, early childhood education. There is opportunity. So that's a bipartisan issue and something I've gotten a lot of support on. I talked to a lot of people over those 4.5 days about apprenticeship and workforce and housing, right? Those are things we can do. So I'm happy to answer any of your questions. I will freely admit that I'm 6 weeks into this and I don't know all the things, but if I don't know, I'll just tell you I don't know. But again, thank you so much for being here. This is really, really exciting.
Thank you, Representative Hoyle, for joining us today at City Club. We will begin our Q&A in just a few moments. See lots of people with great questions already. And before we do that, I just want to take a moment to thank City Club's business and in-kind sponsors. These are generous local businesses, organizations that make our work possible. Thank you to today's Sapphire sponsor, which is AARP Oregon. AARP is dedicated to empowering people aged 50 plus and keeping Oregonians informed, engaged, and active. And you can learn more at states.aarp.org/Oregon. Thank you also to today's gold sponsors, Homes for Good Housing Agency and Network Charter School, as well as our in-kind sponsors, KRVM 91.9 Radio, PAC Info and Simplified Computing, LLC, and Dotson's Photography. We will be back in just a moment with our Q&A and a first question from Lane County Commissioner Lori Trieger. And now you have a moment. Welcome back to the City Club of Eugene and our program with U.S. Congressional Representative Val Hoyle. Our first questioner today will be from Lane County Commissioner Lori Trieger. Lori Trieger is in her first term as a Lane County Commissioner for District 3. Before being elected, she had a decades-long career in nonprofits and is a lifelong advocate for social, economic, racial, and gender justice. Commissioner Trieger.
Good afternoon, Congresswoman Hoyle. Thank you for your many years of public service, and congratulations on becoming the first woman ever elected to Congressional District 4.
Thank you.
You have been an impactful and effective leader on so many issues that have improved lives of everyday working people, and in particular for women in Oregon. Given that you have such a politically diverse congressional district to represent, how will you practically apply your commitment to working in a bipartisan way in general, and specifically on issues that may face some of the strongest headwinds, for example, protecting abortion access and other critical reproductive health care services?
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Trieger. I love saying that too. That's a great question, because people think, okay, if you're going to work in a bipartisan way, that means you have to compromise on everything, and that's not true. I got elected because I'm a Democrat, and because I hold these certain values very strongly, and I made no bones about that when I was running for election. Neither did my opponent tried to pretend he was pro-choice, but we all saw through that. You know, on the matter of abortion access and reproductive health freedom, that's not something I'm going to compromise on, ever. So many people here worked for reproductive health access and abortion, making abortion legal before Roe versus Wade. And I'm looking at you, Kitty Piercy. And fought so hard. And then we got complacent as the other side came in and took away these rights bit by bit by bit. One of the first few bills that we had would take away, under the guise of protecting life, the Republicans tried to pass, well, they did pass, two bills that reduced access to reproductive health care. Now, it won't make it through the Senate, and the president will veto those bills if it did make it through the Senate, which it won't. But that's what's at stake. So my daughter is, you know, her and her husband are starting a family. She has to think about, once she's pregnant, what states she can visit in case she has a miscarriage if she's there. We are seeing this play out in absolutely horrific ways. You know, I've lost a pregnancy, and luckily it was before this horrible Supreme Court ruling, and I can't imagine being sent home to deal with that on my own. I can't imagine begging for what is appropriate health care for an ectopic pregnancy. There's a representative in, I can't remember if it was North Dakota or Oklahoma, who said, why should we make an exception for ectopic pregnancies? Aren't those babies worth saving? That's insane, because women don't live through it. That is a fatal, fatal, fatal condition if not addressed appropriately. But these people are not pro-life. They are not pro-life because they want to stop, limit access to birth control, which stops unwanted pregnancies, which allows women to control their economic future. Because if you can't control how many children you have and when you have them, you cannot control your economic future, right? And the fact is, I don't think anybody, no one I know, is pro-abortion, but we are pro-women having the right to access this health care in private and make that decision between them and their doctor, right? I can't remember who said it, but I used to have this quote on my desk when I was in the House, and it said, in matters of substance, stand like a rock, and in matters of style, swim with the current. So the real trick is figuring out what's a rock and what's the current, right? And I will tell you that access to abortion, access to birth control, access to reproductive health care is a matter of substance and not something I plan to compromise on. But I'll work to find ways where I can. This is just not one of those ways. And understand that this district is pro-choice. So when we had, it is, throughout the district, when we had the anti-choice ballot measure, I forget what measure it was because there have been so many, the last one, 5 counties, so of course Lincoln, Benton, Lane County defeated it. So did Coos and Curry County. Because they are conservative, but they're also more libertarian. And Douglas County, it won by a small margin. So I'm representing the people of this district when I fight for access to reproductive health care. And I will point out that those self-same people that say they're pro-life and want to save unborn babies really don't care once that child is born. Right? What are they looking at doing? They're looking at reducing access to SNAP, to food stamps, to which feeds hungry children. They want reduction of the services to take care of these children once they're here after they force women to have babies. So my father, Catholic, pro-life, but also, and was in the legislature, he would support access to birth control, because that's how you stop unwanted pregnancies. He supporting families and children once they were born, because to him it was a value, right? And we disagreed on that, but at least he was consistent. But that's not what, this is not about protecting children or babies, because if that was so, they'd care about them once they were born. So again, matter of substance, not going to compromise on it, never, no matter what.
We have some questions that have come in over the course of this week in preparation for today's program, and so I will begin with one of those. A question from Sandy Erickson. I would like to know how a country can prevent such issues without national leadership or funding that enables public schools to offer educational programs that teach students how to meet their human needs and live in a socially complex country. Human life education is the best upstream policy to prevent personal poverty, but it's not universally available in the United States. Every other advanced country mandates K-12 education. And a question about how we can have a better education system here.
That's a big question. And something we need to work at the local level, state level, and at the federal level, because what we have seen over the past few decades, and it's really taken hold now, is an attack on public education. From people who believe that if you don't have the money to pay for your education, then you shouldn't get it. So the current chair of the Education and Workforce Committee, it was Education and Labor, but the Republicans changed it to Education and Workforce, because God forbid you have labor in the name of a committee, is anti-public education. She is no different than Betsy DeVos, right, who Trump put in charge of the Department of Education, even though she is anti-public education. She did not want to forgive student loans, right, again, which is a massive issue and very different from when we grew up, right, where education was more affordable. And it is frightening what we've seen, and what we've seen here locally, right, where the extreme right has come after the school board elections, and we've been caught unaware. They have been working at this, and they have an agenda that is anti-public education, it is anti-teacher, right? They want to send our limited funds to private schools. And I went to a Catholic school from 1st through 8th grade, but guess what? In a private school, they don't have to provide the same services as a public school. So I went undiagnosed with a learning disability because that school didn't have to provide those services. There wasn't an opportunity. It made my life a hell of a lot more difficult. Till I got to a public school, till I got to a teacher who, in a resource room, and a school that had the ability to identify those things and provide the services and help to allow me to be in Congress. But I would not be here, and I would probably be like two of my siblings who did not graduate from high school if I did not have that opportunity. So I think this is one of the most serious issues that we are confronting today, because if you look in Florida, if you look in these Republican-controlled states that are Republican-controlled in many ways because of voter suppression and really egregious redistricting, if you're not paying attention to what's happening in North Carolina, then you should. They got forced to draw a map that was more fair, and then they made their Supreme Court elections partisan, so they took over the Supreme Court, and they're running the Harper versus Moore case up to the Supreme Court, which would say that the legislature could overturn the Secretary of State. The legislature could overturn anything any court says on redistricting. We will probably lose 4 seats because this will be egregiously gerrymandered. And that's wrong. But these people also have an anti-public education message and agenda. And this is, again, why I believe that Democrats need to be in control, because we need to deliver public education in a way that is safe for the students, that addresses the needs of the community, and is not attacking the basic things that we do to take care of our community, whether that is keeping kids safe during COVID, right? Supporting them in their mental health needs, right? Delivering special education services, which again, the federal government needs to pay the fair share. If you mandate something, you should be paying for that, and the federal government is not doing that in the way that it needs to. That would make a huge difference. And not attacking students because of their sexual orientation. Not banning books. So although DeSantis wants to say, oh, this is just, you know, the teachers union that's showing these empty bookshelves, the fact is, no, that's the law. Teachers and librarians are afraid to put books on the shelf until they get okayed because it's a felony if they decide that it's the wrong book. You know, are you there, God? It's me, Margaret. We all read that book. That is a coming-of-age book for every young girl, right? And that has been banned, right? Read, yes, in certain school districts that has been banned. I could go through the list, but we know what happens when people start banning books and access to education and access to discussion, right, under the guise of calling it woke. It's scary, and we need to stop it. And again, we're not going to do that because, again, the chair of the Education Workforce Committee is actually anti-public education, anti-labor, but hopefully we'll have a different chair in 2 years.
Another question on a completely different topic. I'll probably have questions for you on all topics before the end of today. So this question relates back to something you mentioned about this being a coastal district, and also thinking about the West Coast and the unique housing challenges that we face on the West Coast, but also the unique natural resource and place opportunity that exists here. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about connections between our timber economy, our housing needs, and innovation in industry in the remainder of the 21st century.
Well, I'm glad you asked me an easy question.
Yes.
Softball question right there. It's not, actually. So this is the mix, and actually we are talking with former Governor Kitzhaber because he has some proposals about how do we protect our natural resources, our streams, our rivers, our riparian zones, acknowledge that, again, 72% of this district is timberlands, right? And so there are federal timberlands, state timberlands, private timberlands, and we all manage them differently. The fact that we're having greater wildfires, so how do we prevent these wildfires from being so egregious, which means funding our wildland firefighters, making sure that in the off-season that they're clearing out the brush that they need to make sure that things are more fireproof, making sure that we have more professional firefighters who are trained in structural firefighting as these fires are coming closer to the wildland-urban interface, otherwise known as the WUI. I live in one of those areas, so it's a particular interest. We started an apprenticeship program for professional firefighters. Our first place we did that was in Jackson County. They were able to put, 4 firefighters on a truck instead of 3. They were able to stop a fire from exploding right out. So there are ways that we can address that, but we have to acknowledge that climate change is here, that many of the trees that we have may not be right for this particular climate. Like, we have about 3 acres, and I can see the trees that we have, incense cedar, and they're not doing as well. So right place, right time, and then housing. As I said, we can't look at these things separately. We have to protect the natural resources that makes Oregon the most beautiful state in the country to live in, right? That's a matter of substance. That's not a matter of style. We also have to acknowledge that we have to house more people and do it in a way that has the least impact on these beautiful natural areas, right? While acknowledging we have to build more housing. That's just like, that has to be an agreed upon fact. How we do it, we can work around, but it has to be thought about, the rural areas, the conservative areas, progressive areas, cities, towns, they're all different. I talked to a number of mayors in smallish towns throughout the district, and I met with a bipartisan group of legislators yesterday. None of them were from Portland because they apparently got 10 inches of snow. Who knew? But every single one of them said, in order for us to expand, right? In order for us to, Sarah Gelser said, in Albany, there is the largest available developable land for business, but they can't put anyone there because they need money for changing the highway off-ramp, and they need money for sewer and water treatment. Every single one of them, and those of you who've been in city or county government, those water and sewer plants and systems which have to be upgraded. Like in Newport, there's 11,000 people, but there's 40,000 in the summer. And those people aren't paying income taxes or property taxes, so they aren't paying for that infrastructure. But they have to build the infrastructure to manage for all of that. So I think that the federal government, which is why I'm really, really glad that I'm on the water subcommittee in transportation infrastructure, and also we're working with Margie Hoffman, who is the director for Oregon of the Rural Economic Development, and they have grants and programs, and I have said to her, the number one issue that I hear all the time is water and sewer investment in that infrastructure. And those are good jobs at prevailing wage, right? With apprenticeship requirements. So we can train our workforce, we can build appropriately and sustainably, but again, investing in infrastructure is something the federal government is supposed to do, but has neglected doing because of Peter DeFazio's work as ranking member and then chair of the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. We got a bipartisan Infrastructure Act, barely bipartisan, but it was bipartisan. And we have monies, and we're working with the administration to make sure that they come back here. But that's sort of, it's a big, giant problem, right?
Joel Corrin, City Club member. Today is the 1-year anniversary of the invasion of Ukraine. What experience have you had with foreign affairs issues, particularly Ukraine?
So I don't have a lot of background in foreign affairs issues. I have a lot of background in international trade. Ukraine was one of my territories. I had territories in Europe and Southern Africa and and the Middle East. So I know the people there. They're good people. What happened in Ukraine was atrocious. And what I have done, whether it was as labor commissioner and now as congressperson, is I've worked with refugees from Ukraine, people from Mariupol, right? Women who've been raped. Putin thought he could come in and take Ukraine. He thought that everybody would stand by and just let it happen. He felt that, he could take that back because he sees it, that it should be part of Russia. And the Ukrainians stood up and said, no, you can't take our country. I think there is a good amount of support in Congress for Ukraine, although there are some people who are peddling the idea that somehow Russia's the victim here. And it is not. So we have to figure out how to work to make sure that this war stops. But that doesn't mean asking a sovereign country to give up parts of their country and independence any more that we would say to a country that attacked us, here, take Alaska, and we'll call it even. That's not how this works. So I am very grateful that there is united support for Ukraine in calling out Putin and his government for the war crimes that they are committing. And again, talking to people from Ukraine, I can tell you it is so much worse than you could even imagine. And I do appreciate that Biden has not sent our soldiers over to fight another foreign war. That is one of the things I've signed on to, is making sure that, governments, presidents, both Republican and Democrat, have worked to bypass Congress in declaring war. And we want to make sure that we have some kind of a balance of power, some kind of a backstop, right? That should be Congress who gets to declare war, and presidents should not bypass that really, really important process. So I think there's support. There's also support for a negotiated end to this war, because it's not good for anyone, and I sincerely hope that there's a way to help Putin find a face-saving way out, because this did not turn out the way he thought, without asking a sovereign country to actually give up their country. But that solution needs to come from those two countries, and we need to support them in that.
Congresswoman Hoyle, it makes me so happy to be able to say that in public. So happy that you're my representative, our representative. Everything you're saying is music to my ears. As the executive director of Better Eugene Springfield Transportation, you knew this was coming.
Yeah.
Best, I want to talk about transportation. Very happy that you're on the House Transportation Infrastructure Committee, the Surface Transportation Subcommittee, that you're seeing opportunities for bipartisan work. Can you drill down a little bit and talk to us about what transportation priorities you see opportunities to make progress on? Thank you.
Great, thank you. That is a great question. And because of my background in the bicycle industry and representing districts, I mean, Kitty Piercy and I, we both represented Bethel. It is a lower income community with a lack of walkable areas, right? So when we're talking about transportation, I think we have to think about the appropriate transportation for the places that we're in. So whether that is investing in making sure that we have more access to electric charging stations so that we can move to electric cars, or more public transportation, which has gotten just really ridiculously contentious, where, or rail. We need to get people out of cars, right? Fossil fuel powered cars, right? And that will take an investment and thinking about things differently. But again, thinking about what is the appropriate transportation for that area and the communities that we live in. So that's something I'm working very, very hard on. I also have developed a really good working relationship with the chair of the Transportation Infrastructure Committee. His name is Sam Graves. He's from Kansas. Yes, he's from Kansas. I was like, one of those states, Kansas. And the company that's developing the Coos Bay Port is called North Point. This is a public-private partnership. And North Point is based in his district. So normally, as a frontline Democrat in a swing district, the chairperson of the opposite party of the committee you're in wouldn't make your priorities his priority, normally. But Sam Graves, and he worked very closely with Peter DeFazio when Peter was chair, is very interested in helping with this project, and he said, transportation infrastructure shouldn't be partisan. But we can argue about how much to spend, where we should spend it, right? But we shouldn't be arguing about investments in transportation. They're looking at overturning some of the water protection rules that the president has passed. I mean, that's what we're going to discuss next week. Things that make more surety in how we protect our local waterways. They're going to overturn it. It'll probably get through the Senate. The president will veto it, and then we'll vote on it again. But so there are things we disagree on. But that package, if we get the Coos Bay port, and we applied for a mega grant and we didn't get it, but we're applying again in the second round. If we get that, and we have support from Republicans, we need to invest in all of those ancillary surface transportation areas that will allow, again, our containers to go directly to rail so we can take trucks off the road and keep our farmers and manufacturers from having to drive up to Seattle. That helps us on I-5, and anyone that's gone up I-5 knows that's a great idea. Working with Representative Nancy Nathanson, who has just been such a strong supporter of rail in figuring out how do we upgrade the rail system so that we can have passenger rail, right? So that we can get up to Portland or Seattle without having to get in a car. Right now, we don't have the ability to do that. And we can talk about rail companies and their issues, right? Where they've invested more in stock buybacks than in safety and workforce. But so I guess the answer is I am very hopeful, and this is bipartisan, and the administration has a lot of money, and they're willing to invest it, and my job is to make sure they invest it here.
Hi, Congresswoman Hoyle. It's very nice to be here today. I've learned a lot, and I am really thrilled that you began with climate. My name is Patty Hine, and I work with local climate grassroots organizations. I wanted to bring it a little bit local here. We've learned a lot about some big things, but we're doing some important things here in Eugene. On February 6th, after a robust process spanning over 2.5 years, Eugene City Council, by a vote of 5-3, became the first city in Oregon to prohibit fossil fuel infrastructure in new low-rise residential construction starting June 30th. This does not apply to any existing buildings. Eugenians have long called for strong climate action. What are your thoughts on supporting local, all-electric, and new residential construction ordinances? Thank you.
So, thank you. And that is a local issue, and I strongly support the home rule concept that says if a local government or people make a decision, we should support that. To the extent, and this is a separate issue, and I will answer your question, we had 2 bills to overturn some laws that Washington, D.C. passed, right? And whether I agreed with them or not, it didn't matter because the people there in the representative government made those decisions. So I voted no because I believe in home rule. And I believe that we elected a city council, they made a decision, we support that decision, right? It seems pretty clear. The decisions in Roseburg are going to be very different than in Eugene. So I'm working at the federal level on reducing methane to fight climate change. A recent report found that the global fossil fuel industry would only need to invest 3% of their earned income from last year to reduce its methane emissions by 75%. So these companies could easily reduce their emissions, but they'd rather pad their shareholders' pockets because, again, if you do stock buybacks, you get taxed less, right? So this is a big corporate giveaway. So I think we should stop giving incentives to fossil fuel companies who have made, huge profits and are still charging more at the gas pump, right? That we shouldn't give them an incentive to pay their shareholders instead of doing the right thing. And we can do that with tax policy. I will say we're not going to do that with tax policy for the next 2 years, but there's a chance in 2024. And the EPA is working on an administrative rule to get our methane emissions under control. Some of my colleagues and I sent the EPA a letter to express our support and urge the agency to set requirements that are as strict as possible. So I will do what I can with what I have in the next 2 years, knowing that the leadership in the Republican House is very tied to supporting the fossil fuel industry and undoing anything that we have moved forward on in addressing the climate crisis, because that's who buys their elections. And so we're going to fight that as hard as possible, and the best way to do that is to make sure we get Democratic control of the House and the Senate and hold the presidency in 2024.
And with that, I'm sorry to say that we are out of time for questions with our program today, but want to thank Representative Hoyle for answering so many and sharing so much with us about the work that you are doing now. This has been our February 24th, 2023 conversation at the City Club of Eugene with Congresswoman Val Hoyle, an update on local, regional, and national issues. Before we thank our speaker one last time, I would like to recognize our diamond sponsors today. Kaiser Permanente exists to provide high-quality, affordable healthcare services and to improve the health of our members in the communities that we serve. You can find more information at kp.org. The University of Oregon has helped Oregonians to question critically, think logically, reason effectively, communicate clearly, act creatively, and live ethically since 1876. And you can find more information at uoregon.edu. Peace Health has been proud to serve Eugene, Lane County, and beyond as your hometown healthcare partner for more than 80 years. The Peace Health mission is to keep you and your family healthy, and we invite you to learn more at peacehealth.org. And Lane Community College transforms lives through learning. LCC provides comprehensive, accessible, high-quality educational opportunities that promote student success. And you can learn more at lanecc.edu. Thank you to the City of Eugene and to Lane County for their support, and a special thank you to our award-winning public radio station, KLCC 89.7, for airing City Club programs on Monday evenings at 7 p.m. For those who are listening right now, your household is one of several thousand who have tuned in to hear this conversation with Representative Hoyle today, and we are so happy that you have chosen to join us. All recent City Club programs are archived on KLCC as well as on the City Club of Eugene's YouTube channel and as podcasts. We invite you to look them up. Next week, on Friday, March 3rd, City Club will get schooled by Gen Z. Look forward to that. The University of Oregon undergraduate researchers Jess Galdis, Firuza Legas, and Tyler Ramos will join us for a program that we have coordinated with UO's Center for Undergraduate Research and Engagement. UVO undergraduate research, fruit flies, missing persons, and ecosystem stewardship. This promises to be a fascinating discussion. And then on Friday, March 10th, please join us at the Fifth Street Market for a City Club focused on anti-Semitism. We look forward to welcoming Rabbi Meyer Goldstein, Rabbi Yitzhak Husbands-Hankin, and FBI Supervisory Special Agent Ryan Dwyer for a program called Anti-Semitism and How to Fight It. This program unfortunately engages an all too current event in our community, bias and harms that are hurting people who we care about, and we hope that you will join us for this important discussion. If you have a suggestion for a future City Club program, or you think that there is an issue that we as a community should be talking about, please make that suggestion at the City Club of Eugene's website, cityclubofelugene.org. We welcome everyone to join this conversation. A final thank you to our speaker today, Representative Val Hoyle. Thank you so much for your service to the people of Congressional District 4, and thank you all for joining us at the City Club of Eugene. Take care.